Great. Hello, everybody who's joining us here on this wonderful Monday. My name is Daniel Protz. I'm the founder and CEO of Wiki, and we're talking to the founding team here from a brand called Freak Shake, which we're going to introduce here in a second. But Freak Shake is a disruptive endurance drink that is focused on helping the athletes that are out there training hard every day recover faster and go further. So without too much further ado, let's just start on the left-hand side of the screen here. Todd Newman. Todd, you're the founder of Freak Shake. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. So we launched Freak Shake last fall, and I have over 15 years leading innovation and marketing in large CPG companies, mostly US based. And after a career in, kind of in the big co's, decided it was time to kind of go back to some experiences that I had actually with Daniel going way back in college to endurance sports. So I was a rower in college, and it was a pretty formative experience for me. And I've always sort of dreamed of doing something in the sports nutrition category. So the time seemed right to give it a go. And so our first concept, which we'll obviously get into, was this endurance oriented sports nutrition brand. And so my previous experience kind of spans, most recently, I was the VP of Innovation for Keurig Dr. Pepper. Before that, I worked in the seafood industry and also the Hershey Company.
Great. Um, and David, maybe we'll go next with you.
Sure, I'm glad to, Daniel. My name's Dave Stewart. I have a PhD in plant biochemistry out of Cal Berkeley. I went into the ag biotech area for 8 years in Davis, California, before landing a job after a consolidation with Hershey. There, they wanted me to work on raw materials, but in particular, cocoa. And then in about 2004, the big antioxidant in food rage came on, where everyone was labeling. And we started a lot of work internally with characterizing cocoa and a lot of our ingredients and even our finished products with the polyphenol content in there, and also started funding research on the effect of epicatechin, but also some of the other polyphenols on human physiology. I left Hershey in 2012, but I've been staying quite active with the ongoing physiology and biology of how these things work in humans, and in particular endurance, and also switching the body from fat burning to from carb burning to fat burning, mitochondrial biogenesis, and other things like that that we may touch upon here. Thanks.
Great. Nice to meet you. And Byron, how about you? Short introduction.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm Byron Ferguson. I'm an anesthesiologist at UC San Diego. I have 15 years of clinical experience. My role in this is basically the application of the science to the human body. With anesthesia, my pre-op patients are kind of like athletes in the sense of, they undergo a significant physical stress. And the physiology is actually very similar between my pre-op patients and endurance athletes and just regular athletes. And so it has wide applicability what we're doing here, and excited to be here. Thanks.
Great. And how did the three of you get connected, if I can ask?
Yeah, I could kick that off. So Dave and I actually overlapped at Hershey probably over 10 years ago now. And when I was beginning to explore this concept, I immediately thought of him and some of the expertise he had in plant-based micronutrients, and looking for potential targets to supplement an endurance drink with. And so he was keen to kind of reconnect, and has been helping since the beginning. Byron and I know each other in the San Diego kind of masters athletics community, and we just share a common interest, I think, in health and wellness, and we've kind of just through the local network here and become friends. And he took a really keen interest in some of the science that Dave and I were looking at early on. So I started reading some of the studies, and I was like, I'm a marketer by training, not a scientist. So I said, Byron, does any of this make sense? Am I reading this right? Can this really be true? And he's like, no, that doesn't sound right. He starts reading it. And then, a week later, we had 80 studies that he'd gone, down the rabbit hole. So he was hooked on the application of some of these ingredients that we're looking at, as well as the macronutrients in athletes. So both of these guys have just been really great resources in sort of defining the product strategy and how we want to position in the endurance sports space.
Very cool. Well, we're going to get more into it right now, and maybe we could advance the slides, and we'll talk a little bit about the background and the point of the product. I should say that I am a user of the product, and I think it's great. I think we advanced a little bit too far there, Carla. There you go. And I think it does work, but we'll get into that a little bit more. I'm a little bit biased, I think, on this. So listen, when you first explained to me the concept, Todd, you basically were telling me that it helps to aid recovery from long endurance efforts, right? And at the time, I wasn't really doing a lot of long endurance efforts, so I didn't have much recovery to be doing. As I think as a lot of older people maybe don't have much time. But I've been using it more and more, and it definitely does help with sustaining the exercise. And I do think that, I mean, I've tested it a bit to test on recovery, but why don't you tell us a little bit about kind of like what is the impact that you're looking for in the athlete, and then maybe we can link that to the science a bit as we get into it.
Yeah, for sure. I think Freak Shake represents kind of a new approach to the fueling and recovery needs of endurance exercise. So, as a innovation guy in CPG, I kind of watch trends, and I've noticed that over the last 10 to 15 years, there's been a significant shift in consumers' ideas about fitness, right? And you could say the CrossFit movement, there's been this renewed interest in obstacle course racing, adventure racing, and endurance sports across all ages, really, and abilities. And I think that's reflected changing consumer ideals about, moving from sort of exercise as a way to manage weight and kind of put on lean muscle and sort of more vanity driven objectives to true functional strength and endurance fitness objectives. And if you think about that, why hasn't the category really evolved to reflect that? I think you see a lot of very traditional approaches to sort of ingredient centered supplements and nutritional products. So get your electrolytes, get your BCAAs, et cetera. Or, kind of diet centered approaches like paleo friendly, protein powder, or get your ketogenic, meal supplement, or the vegan version of all the above, right? So we saw an opportunity to build a more consumer-centered brand that really holistically tackles the needs of, endurance training specifically. And so we're kind of thinking about folks who are pretty serious about their exercise. They don't have to be elites, but they're probably exercising at least 3 or 4 days a week at a fairly high volume, moderate to high intensity. And that's where you're going to see, if you're doing more than an hour of exercise and really depleting yourself, that the benefits really start to accrue with a product like Freak Shake. Okay. So our goal is really to elevate the impact of athletes training with a more comprehensive platform that can kind of anchor and jumpstart an athlete's broader fueling and recovery program. So, we talk about the gas and the mechanics. So there's the macro kind of nutrient strategy with carbs, protein, its electrolytes. And we can get into that, but that's really designed to be higher octane, rapidly available fuel to either fuel up or replenish the tank. And then the supplementation piece of this, which is probably, the more novel component, is the mechanics. So we have we are supplementing Freak Shake products with epicatechin right now. We have plans to improve that stack to really tune the cellular machinery of endurance between between bouts of exercise. And I think that's where these guys can probably get much deeper into the science. I'm sure there'll be questions about that, but that's sort of how we set this up. And I think this dual acting kind of approach to a single fueling platform is truly novel in the category.
Cool. And David, can I ask, how does a company like Hershey get involved in trying to investigate these types of impacts? I mean, it's a candy company. So was it just something that was known out there as an effect of some of these natural plant derivatives, or was they really looking for some sort of solution? Like, how did you arrive at some of these realizations in your research?
Well, that's a great question. But importantly, any food company has to be very cognizant of the application of any of its raw materials. So it's a cocoa company, it's a licorice company, a lot of different products, but our raw material is the highest source, cocoa bean, of a particular polyphenol that has already been mentioned by Todd, which is epicatechin. And the science underpinning epicatechin is really fascinating. In some respects, it mimics exercise itself. In other words, you could take, and these tests have been done in the clinic, you can take unfit individuals and help them burn more fat and hence calories, and also strengthen themselves with a diet of cocoa, or in the case that we're dealing with, to have it as a concentrated form, we can get epicatechin from cocoa, but preferably from tea, which is an abundant source as well, and have it available in powder form where you can take it in a variety of different ways, including pills or tablets. The science underpinning this, I was involved with and saw its development while at Hershey. And basically, we know that in rats as well as humans, epicatechin feeding over a period of time, 3 or 4 weeks, let's say in humans, will stimulate your muscle development to a slight degree, but significant. It will change your metabolism. It will improve the number and the quality of your mitochondria, your little energy stores within every cell in your body. And there's lots of literature that it can improve even neurological function like memory and recall. Brain is very intensely uses energy there. And so the idea is that it can act to just vitalize your energy stores. We did launch a trial product while at Hershey called Regen, and it was designed for heavy-duty athletes, football players, distance runners, to recover better. It didn't take hold because maybe the science wasn't there, the market wasn't ready for it. So one of the ideas here is to use epicatechin as your centerpiece to stimulate cellular energy, to improve your mitochondria and even your muscle tone post-exercise, or even in a get in shape type of program. The other element that we're focused in on is something that will reduce a natural product that will reduce inflammatory response, which is quercetin or derivatives of that. So that's the 1-2 package here. Epicatechin to strengthen your energy and your musculature significantly, but maybe not enough to break a world record. But in recovery, you're going to need that. And then anti-inflammatory in the form of quercetin, both found naturally and in your diet in many different forms. But here we can apply it in a concentrated form through tablets or dry mix form. So that's the idea to the product and why the naturals are used there.
Okay, fascinating. Maybe we could advance the slide, but in the meantime, David, quickly, is it only available naturally, or was it also possible to manufacture the same substance, epicatechin?
Manufacturing,
Yeah.
it chemically, I know of a 23-step process that can get you there. Way too complicated to reduce to practice. You can also interconvert certain polyphenols by adding hydroxyls, giving them stereochemistry, and those steps could be 3 or 4. But right now, the best way to go is to take extracts from plants rich in these and use those. Okay.
Okay, great. So Byron, if I could ask you, all these benefits that you're seeing, also some here on the page. I mean, these are all fantastic things for general health. And did you ever run across any of this kind of work in your medical training or in your schooling, or was it all pretty revolutionary for you when you heard about it the first time?
Well, it's pretty revolutionary. I have not experienced this in med school, and where Western medicine is, we don't train a lot when it comes to these natural ways of treating patients and preventing disease. That is changing. There is quite a bit of a wellness push. No, when I saw it from a Western scientific mindset, I thought, this is crazy. It doesn't make any sense. Like, why? I don't even put all the benefits down when I write for a grant for this or write for a research project, because it just seems crazy. But now that I've gone through this and looked at it, I realize that it's not crazy. It's fantastic, and the reason it's fantastic is that original slide, the mechanic part. It's not so much that epicatechins do all these things. We kind of approach our the way we treat patients, but also athletes, in that, hey, well, your body will take care of it. We'll just give you the stuff, and your body's going to take care of it. And in many ways, for athletes, they're up to a point they can do that. But certainly when our athletes are patients, they can't. They need help with the cellular mechanic, the mitochondria.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yes, there's a million things that flavonols in general, epicatechins, quercetins in particular do, but it does make sense because it's actually just priming the cellular structure. It's priming the mitochondria to do all these things. Mitochondria is a very central aspect of all this metabolism. So it makes sense that it affects mood. It makes sense that it's neuroprotective, cardioprotective, affects high blood pressure, it affects the kidney, et cetera, because it's affecting the mitochondria specifically, which is everywhere in every single cell. And there's a multitude of them in every cell. So that's why I've been kind of fascinated. It's new to me, and the applications are wide ranging.
Right. And are there any historical facts related to, when you think about cocoa and tea, you think about Eastern medicine, or you think about some cultures that would have had access to natural cocoa throughout many centuries. Is there any evidence to show that like longevity or health was linked to these consumptions, which we wouldn't have had in the Western world as much?
Maybe I can
I'll let
address.
Dave answer that.
Cocoa is an American product. It wasn't found, and Europeans discovered. In fact, Montezuma and Cortez met in what's now Mexico City, and I think Cortez got introduced to cocoa. The Aztec and Mayan people would prized it as a currency, individual beings, but also as a food that would invigorate you. In fact, if you were traveling long distance, your power bar would have been a mass of cocoa and probably maize in a ball that you could drop into water, or you can chew it directly and get a ton of energy that way. So they recognized it. And look, I mean, cocoa is going to have fat, it's going to have calories in there, but also they appreciated the strength that a warrior could have by just eating that kind of food for long distance travel. Their couriers would have this sort of food. So today, you can actually go down into the more traditional parts of Mexico and actually get a ball of cocoa mixed with maize and other things there, spices, and people would routinely drop it in to hot water or another warm beverage. The recent science on this, well, that's in antiquity, but the recent science is that you can take people, animals first, mice that haven't been exercised, you can feed them pure epicatechin or a mixture of it more naturally, and they tend to get in better shape without increased exercise. If you were to layer that onto an exercising mouse, they actually improve a little bit in performance in treadmill tests. It takes 2 or 3 weeks for that reaction to occur in mice because their metabolism and everything. Probably 5 weeks or so of treatment in a human, not exercised, and there are tests clinical tests that show that you can get improvement in muscle tone and other aspects, mitochondria density and things like that, with a diet of cocoa, or you can go to a purified form like we would have in our products with derived from tea, or you can even use a Hershey cocoa if you want to take 3 or 4 teaspoons a day and get the amount that we would recommend. I would say 75 milligrams up to 150 milligrams of that per day is going to give you that effect. And I personally have been on a diet or taken as a supplement 100 milligrams of epicatechin for 5 or 6 years. So, and I haven't died yet. So, but honestly, I think it contributes to my health and wellness, even though I exercise virtually daily. I think I'm in better shape and I can ski without getting muscle cramps and things like that after a day of skiing. Since I've been on that. So this is a casual testimonial, but a little bit of the history of epicatechin and quercetin, again, found in other foods such as apples and onions, which is a current source of more purified forms of quercetin that's available to the supplement companies right now. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, it does. Well, my kids will be happy because they eat a lot of chocolate here in Switzerland. So, well, let's talk a little bit about the product, Todd. We got, a little bit of description up here about what it's about, but tell us about I know the first product you launched was the powder, I think, and that's the one that goes in the shake. But tell us about why you chose, the different features, what you were going for, and how the product actually came out, and maybe even a little bit about how you might be optimizing it.
I think I kicked off like our intent was to really ground what we designed in science. So it started with a pretty broad stroke, looking very widely at kind of the most established data and not necessarily starting with what's trendy. And so, we'll talk a lot about carb charge, right? This is a high carbohydrate. It's got 33 grams of sugar. Well, that's not super popular right now even with many endurance athletes. And the International Olympic Committee issued a statement actually last fall, a warning that there's an issue even among elite athletes with insufficient energy supply, right? So and they cited over 170 studies that showed that carbs are still king. So, we went with what works. And in terms of the sort of nutritional profile, we ended up in 3 places. So there's first of all, there's a lot of substantial evidence that athletes' needs for high carbs, particularly in the recovery phase, are being underserved. I mentioned the IOC consensus statement last fall. They call it a relative energy deficiency in sport, or REDS, by the way, which was a new term to me. If you look at, you could blame it on paleo, keto, South Beach, 20 years ago. It's all some version of the same diet trend, but we're very focused, I think, in athletic communities on protein right now to the exclusion of carbs. And high carb feeding, if you look at what's happening, I'd say the cycling sport is probably the first place where we're starting to see the scales tip back towards favoring carbohydrates. They ended doping a few years ago, and riders are as fast as ever now, and it's because high carb feeding among the elite cyclists. It's just been sort of a war of escalation, who can get the most carbs. These guys are taking 150 grams an hour, and you can
Yeah.
attest to this, right?
Yeah,
Daniel?
yeah. I mean, if you can burn fat efficiently, that's great. But at some point
Yep.
you can't, and then therefore you've got to figure out how to get more carbs in your body during
yeah.
exercise. Yeah.
That's right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's right. And there's just a limit to, so that's the first pillar. And there we can get into sort of how the formula actually helps, especially in recovery, accelerate glycogen synthesis. And then next, looking at the research that Dave has been alluding to around plant polyphenols, the published nutrition and kinesiology research on systems that support endurance. We encountered all this data on epicatechin, tea extracts, cocoa extracts, quercetin. And, there's no reason to reinvent the wheel if nature is providing you a blueprint. So the adaptive properties of those micronutrients became the second pillar and the supplemental component of our product strategy. And then finally, we encountered some really interesting data supporting dairy as a model for an endurance drink, both in terms of the protein composition, the ratio of carbs to protein are very advantageous for recovery. And what surprised me actually the most was some insight that, that dairy milk actually has a significant hydration advantage over almost any other beverage, including water, isotonic drinks. It performs as well as medical oral rehydration solutions on some measures of hydration. So again, it's like nature's presented with a blueprint. Now we're not starting with dairy, but we're replicating the electrolyte stack, for example, and the protein composition, as well as the ratio of carbs to protein. So those three things became sort of the fueling platform, and then the mechanical platform, which we've talked a little bit about, is with the supplementation. So what we ended up with is a product that's got over 1,000 milligrams of electrolytes, which is about 3 times what you'd find in a mainstream isotonic beverage, to support hydration, rehydration, electrolyte replacement. We've got about 12 grams of complete protein, so it's 80% casein and 20% whey, mimicking dairy again. So you get a nice smooth kind of delivery. And then without a lot of the bloat and complaints that some athletes have with 100% whey. And then obviously as a very high carb profile, which has the added benefit of making it taste delicious. And then the other thing that's not on this slide, so we targeted a 3-to-1 ratio of carbs to protein. And the research suggests somewhere in the range of 3 to 4 grams per 1 gram of protein can accelerate glycogen replacement, especially in the 30 to 60 minute kind of immediate post-workout recovery period.
Okay. And okay, so let's talk a little bit about the marketing. Like how do you get the product in front of the right people? I mean, obviously it's a crowded market around this topic. Personally, I had never really used many of these shakes because I didn't like the taste of them. This one tastes great. I mean, it's kind of like a chocolate bomb. In fact, it's almost like a pleasurable thing to drink when you're not exercising. So it's nice to be able to have it. And I think a lot of these products that you get when you're endurance athletes, like the bars and the gels, I'm astounded at the percentage of them that are not really even palatable, right? Like they're hard to eat. And it seems counterintuitive, right? Like, why would you produce a product that's so difficult to consume when consumption is the main, point of getting it down? So I was really pleased by that. But how do you get it out in front of people? What are the things that you lead with in terms of the value proposition against others, and then get it in front of the right folks to get them to trial it? I mean, this is I think from an entrepreneurial journey perspective, it's always a big challenge. It's like to become known, right? Like, how do you become known by that? So how do you do that, and how is it going, right?
would say I'll start with how's it going. Like I think we're still learning about how to position this product because it there's a lot you can say about it, and the more you say, the more confusing consumers become.
Mm.
So finding the kind of the hook is still, I think, an ongoing experiment, right? And we're still in sort of what I would call our launch phase and testing that and sort of refining that. But right now, my current hypothesis is that recovery is probably the more universal benefit in the way in, even though it has significant intra kind of workout benefits.
Mm.
But I think as a recovery platform, the idea that you can go to one product, especially when you're feeling maybe not so great about eating something after a real hard bout, this can quick start your recovery process.
Mhm.
And then I think the disruptive idea here is actually around the carbs, not necessarily the flavonoids. I think the flavonoids make it special for someone who really wants to double click. But the idea that I need, as if I'm a 165-pound athlete and I'm completely depleting myself after an hour more of high intensity exercise, that I need to consume 150 grams of carbs, preferably over per hour over 30-minute increments for 5 to 6 hours to completely replenish my glycogen. We're not going to deliver all of that with one drink. We're delivering 30 to 35 grams, right? So we're even not even getting you through all the way your first feeding, right? Post workout. But I think the idea is that, listen, if you're spending this much effort, you're putting this much work and blood, sweat, and tears into your workout, why aren't you thinking the same way about recovery? That's where all the good stuff happens. That's where you accrue all the benefits of that exertion, right? And so I think the idea that we can help jumpstart the recovery process with sort of a delicious, rewarding post-workout experience. Right now, that's our hypothesis. That's going to be kind of our way in. And then I think for the athletes who want to learn more, the gas and mechanic analogy is really interesting. There's not anything else out there that can kind of make the claim that it's helping your body adapt while you recover.
Yeah, that was my experience. I mean, I started using it because I was training a lot more than I had in 15 years, and I was interested in something that could help me recover. And now, to tell the truth, I actually consume it during exercise, right? Like at least once every 90 minutes or so, I'll have a bottle of it if I'm on like a 7-hour ride or 6-hour ride or something like that. And I definitely have
I know
noticed the difference.
I know you've shared some of your experience with that, especially I thought your insights around decoupling towards the end of long workouts was really, really interesting. And I'd be curious for my partners here to weigh in on what they might hypothesize is responsible for that. But
yeah, I would love to hear about that. I think maybe the people that might listen to this or listening now would be interested as well. I mean, it's really difficult to test these types of things. Even I rode at a pretty high level after university as well, and we had doctors but like, unless you're in a lab all the time, you just are not able to collect enough data on enough athletes to really show strong A/B testing. I track all of the work that I do from a data perspective. I also do lactate testing and all the rest of that kind of thing. So I definitely see improvements, and I notice mentally, physically, and even in my wattage when I don't use the product, like if I just use have some granola bars or Cliff Bars or something. So like, how do you go about, David or Byron, like how would you conduct clinical tests or try to create some sort of statistically significant data around the use case for these types of solutions?
Well, Daniel, you bring up a really good point, because the margin of improvement when you're talking about elite athletes is very, very small. And, you need tons and tons of people in order to do that. The physiology is very similar. We're talking about we're talking about taking our bodies to the limit. So the physiology is very similar to people that aren't endurance athletes. So that's one way to go. One way to look at, hey, what are we doing to the body of someone that is sedentary? And then we're just having them, jog for 2 minutes. The concept is very much the same, and yet there's a much wider range of possibility. So that's one particular aspect. But the other goes just back to the mechanic part. certainly the endurance athlete, for lack of a better term, can manage their lactate better. Obviously not consciously, but they're able to manage their response to surgery or to exercise much better. But they can do so because there's more marked changes within the mitochondria. So there are ways to look at function in the mitochondria. In fact, we're going to do so with preoperative patients. Again, they're not endurance athletes, but we're going to do it with preoperative patients to say, hey, let's put epicatechins, quercetins into pre-op patients and see how their mitochondria change, instead of just looking at these more extreme aspects. What are the post-op complications? What is the lactate? What is all this stuff that's happening? We're going to say, hey, are we changing them at the cellular level? And that is something that can more easily be seen in these extreme athletes. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically if I could put it in layman's terms, you're kind of increasing the sample size that you can run a test on because you don't have access to tons of elite athletes, right? But if you can make those measurements of those same improvements in a different setting, then you also can prove the same science, presumably, right?
Yeah, that's definitely one
that's
aspect,
right.
but there's also, we can go at the very, very smallest aspect of the endurance athlete, again, the mitochondria, and we can see greater changes within that, even in an elite athlete. So that would be the direction we're gonna take. So it's two-pronged. One, yeah, we get the people that can have the greatest changes, and we also act on the smallest aspect of the elite athlete.
Yeah.
There are some studies that we've seen in athletes too, and I think the design of the studies focus on sort of exhausting an elite athlete with sort of based on a standard heart rate target. Then they're given a short recovery window, several hours, let's say, where you would introduce a shake like ours that's supplemented with flavonoids, maybe a high carb, an electrolyte shake, and water, or maybe just an isotonic without the carbs. You could however many cells you want to create, again, sort of a function of the number of athletes you can recruit, and then you would run a time to exhaustion challenge, right? And was it Saunders, Byron, the one we were looking at, that looked at the kind of the high carb versus other recovery kind of solutions. And then I think, so obviously you're going to see hopefully a significant increase in time to exhaustion, or the amount of time it takes someone to volitionally quit when they've recovered with a product like this. And then maybe, Byron, you could comment on some of the other markers that we've talked about looking at, just in terms of that would reflect resilience and recovery.
Yeah, so again, the mitochondria is the number one thing we look at, and there's a million things within that. You really can delineate its approach, because it's part of everything. So if we look at certain aspects of what it does, I mean, we can look at glucose utilization. We can look at actually glucose within the serum, the blood serum, like what are our levels following this. We can look at lactate, of course. We can look at some of the functional apparatus, the transport chain within the mitochondria. And I'm going to apologize up front, because when Todd turned me on to the flavonol stuff, I totally geeked out on it, and so I can see myself going in a bad direction here. But
Don't worry,
trying to
don't
keep
worry.
it, trying to keep it.
Yeah.
And we can look at any of I'll just lump them all into antioxidant. Are we managing our oxidants well? You don't want to completely remove the reactive oxygen species, but we want to use it better. You need it when you recover. Same thing with inflammation. If we were just an anti-inflammatory, we would just say, Advil would be fine, right? But that's not what we're doing. Instead of scrubbing inflammation. What we're doing is making better use of it. And that's the
Right.
whole mechanic
Mhm.
aspect. So there's a million measures of that that we can look at. You know, the serum is ripe with actually the serum and urine are ripe with the endpoints to these metabolites.
Okay.
So we can even look at, you know, how much catecholamines, so epinephrine, dopamine, et cetera, are you using? What do you need to manage your kind of pushes when you are exposed to these extreme situations?
Mhm.
There's a million more, but I'll just kind of leave it at that for right now. It really, again, revolves around the mitochondria.
Mhm.
Okay. And what about, I mean, Todd or David, what about other products that are out there in the market? I mean, again, I'm just speaking personally, I've gotten back into exercising or training. I think I call it training. Like if I'm training this much as I am now, I'm focused on it. Um, there's just like, the kind of Gatorade type drinks, which are full of sugar. And I don't even think that these have much functional benefit. And then there's a lot of electrolytes, there's a lot of bars, there's a lot of gels and things like this. A lot of it has just sugar and flavor in it, it
Mhm.
seems. So what other products are out there and how does yours compare in terms of what it's providing? I know that we've talked already about many of the benefits, but if you're just thinking about like needing to fuel, like maybe we can take the example of, if you're on a long effort, you're not necessarily going to only drink like a freak shake. I mean, this is not enough variety to manage, right? So, but what would be the other things that might complement it that are out there? Because as we mentioned, like you've got to get carbs. Like carbs is the main thing. Like the more concentrated carbs you can get into your body, the better off you are. Which means that they have to be palatable, they have to taste good, right? They have to go down well, and they have to have then benefit. So, like, how do you think that you fall in the whole scheme of the other portfolio of things that are out there being produced by other companies?
I think every athlete has what they believe will work for them, and there's a lot of, I think, superstition about what works. And so one of our challenges, I think, is to overcome that, sort of inertia to trying a new product, a new fueling product. um so obviously, I think, our competitive set certainly includes gels and products like goo, uh, gummies and things like that that have concentrated carbs. Um, we also intersect with electrolyte uh, beverage solutions. So, like whether that's a drip drop or a Noon or a liquid IV,
Mhm.
And then finally, we also intersect with protein
Mhm.
supplements, right? People who are looking for protein. We have protein in the product. It's not necessarily explicitly for muscle gain. It's there to kind of boost recovery and help support muscle recovery in endurance athletes. We don't really need to blow out the protein levels,
Mhm.
especially if you're not carrying 200 pounds of skeletal muscle around. Um, maybe you are, Daniel, on, on
I'm
on your
not,
bike there up in the
not.
Alps, but
Unfortunately, there's
so
not that much skeletal muscle here.
yeah, so that's what, and then we would never recommend using packaged products exclusively. Like obviously the best way to fuel and recover is a healthy diet that includes complex carbs.
Mm.
Mhm.
But whether you didn't have time to fuel or you're a little dehydrated, didn't get electrolytes on board, didn't have breakfast, whatever it is, or just getting that jump start post workout, or if it's you're on a 7-hour ride and you just want some variety. I
Mm.
think we fit into the broader kind of ecosystem of those products. Um, so I don't think it's necessarily a replacement. uh, I hope that it becomes sort of the totem for endurance athletes to think more uh, conscientiously about recovery and about how they're fueling.
Mm. David,
You know,
Byron, any comments on that one?
Well,
yeah, just to kind of highlight one of the things that Todd said, I think the key is the immediate post workout. And that's the advantage that Freak Shake has, is it's so important. That first 30 minutes cannot be overstated how important it is to get carbohydrates in. and not just carbohydrates, all the stuff, but we'll just say carbohydrates from right now. And even beyond that, maintaining the carbo loading beyond just that first 30 minutes is very important. But if you can get it in that first 30 minutes, that makes the next 4 hours very easy. And as you pointed out, Daniel, you're doing it during your exercise, which is also very helpful. So what Freak Shake, I think, does very well is provides that very quick bolus that you need. And of course, it's not, you still need your vegetables, you still need your fruits, but you can't eat 10 oranges in the first 30 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to balance it. And as I said, like a lot of it is just palatability, right? Like you need some variety and you need also hydration, right? To do all the and the more you hydrate, I think the more it all gets diluted as well, as my experience. David, any comments there before we advance here?
Yeah, I'm thinking back to some of the early days on liquids and getting away from a Gatorade and going to a chocolate milk, and that was sort of a takeoff to getting into the carbohydrates, the proteins, the other elements here, the electrolytes. Not the full solution, but I think the genesis of this sort of more complex recovery drink had some of it start then, and we were aware of it when we were at Hershey. We marketed chocolate milk, and that was what that one product was based on that I mentioned earlier. The other thing is the caution about reading a lot of this literature, as I've gotten familiar with it, the number of people that are in some of these tests is not very big. And so I think there's been a lot of hearsay or science that's been done apparently leading in a direction, but it's just not significant because you can't get that whole group of endurance athletes that would want to go with the test product and then the other product. And so the science behind this is scattered. And I think we're on the right track. We've got a good base for which to move forward with. And for the time being, I think rather than having large experiments and things like that, we're going to have to rely on testimonials from elite athletes that really find that it's working and things like that, building to larger tests on the whole concept. But that's sort of historical from my reading of the literature. It was kind of difficult to sort out really what was effective if you've only got 6 or 8 elite athletes, even on a crossover design coming through. I mean, the data just didn't have that robustness. And so I think in the future, looking to those sorts of clues and how the tests were run and the variety of foods that they're also taking in and liquids is also going to be it. But I think we're on the right track here. We've got science that's underpinning it. We can actually look at other cohorts of people like Byron was talking about. People that are frail respond to chocolate milk, epicatechin. Memory is improved with large population studies when you look at epicatechin improving it. So I know these polyphenols are complex, but they're also safe. We find them in our food, and used at the right level, they're having a plethora of effects. And I think Byron wants to use that in some of his surgical procedures or recovery. And so I think there's going to be a lot of applications beyond endurance athletes in terms of driving better performance, both before and then after exhaustive exercises.
That's great.
Yeah, I think, and in terms of trends and consumer expectations, Daniel, I think what we're hoping that we're reading the tea leaves correctly and predicting that there will be sort of the pendulum will swing away from protein overload. There's been something like over 6,000 brands in the last 3 years have launched with protein-centric functional kind of benefits, and back towards where the science says athletes really are under leveraging carbs, right? And you've seen that starting to tip in cycling. So we're really focused on building relationships with athletes, coaches, trainers in endurance sports like cycling. Rowing is a great one because doesn't get a lot of attention. You get a lot of tipping points. A small small communities, the word spreads faster. Of course, distance running, triathlon, even swimming would all be kind of target kind of markets for those types of partnerships. And then what's really exciting to me is we're also looking at the application, among service professionals, elite fighters. So we're currently testing the product here in San Diego at the Coronado Naval Special Warfare Command, where the SEALs train. So there's about 1,000 SEALs, uh, special recon, war fighters training there, and they have that's where they run their human performance program.
That's
So they're
perfect.
evaluating the product right now,
Perfect.
and we think that's a huge opportunity, and that a product like Freak Shake can actually improve force readiness potentially.
Yeah.
Even so, that's really exciting. And then from just from a commercial kind of innovation standpoint, we're obviously always exploring new flavors, different use cases, such as just an oral rehydration solution, something that would be more like a lower calorie kind of hydration based with the kind of resilience benefits of our polyphenols. We're looking at applications in the surgical setting, especially among frail and elderly patients. And then I think, at some point I'd really like to have, a vegan version of the product, and so we can follow some of those trends as well.
That's great. Yeah, I noticed that you got like tablets coming out soon. Like it's a different different format.
Yeah, they're actually available. It's called it's the Freak Shake brand, but they're called Grit Fuel.
Okay. Yeah. I have to get some of those
And
shipped over
then
here.
eventually we'll have some Gain Grog out there too for the muscleheads.
Yeah, great. This is like more packages on the way. No, I think it's great. I mean, I personally think it's really helped me with my training. And I'm gonna keep using it, and I'm gonna try to keep testing it. Some days like try not using it and see what happens. How the ride goes and things like that. Maybe I can even publish some of those results, because I do think that it helps you sustain longer, and the further and further you push, the more that makes a difference. Well, great guys. Well, thanks so much for doing this. We're almost out of time. Any other things that you think are important that we might have left off? I know that it's freakshake. Your website address is?
Freakshake.co, and we're running
Okay.
sales right now on Amazon and on our website. So if anyone listening is interested in trying it, now's the time to get in.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll keep an eye on that. And yeah, definitely interested to continue to watch how you guys develop this. And it seems like there's a plethora of opportunities to put the science to use, and it tastes great. I mean, I think it's not expensive compared to others, and I think that it makes sense in many ways versus what else is out there. So.
Well, I really appreciate the opportunity to be on here, and it's been a really interesting conversation.
Great. Thanks, guys. Thanks, David, Byron, Todd. See you soon.
Thanks for the opportunity.
And you're welcome.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye. Now, let's see.